this buzz is gonna be creepy, not for the faint of heart. Don't go away. This week, it's been 30 years since the premiere of Dark Shadows, so let's celebrate. A spine-tingling tour of haunted Hollywood, buzzing with horror novelist Dean Koontz. Director John Carpenter comes to the defense of sci-fi and horror films. And 100 years of Jekyll and Hyde in the movies.
Free at night.
Welcome, buzzers. You may enjoy this and play along at home. Little quiz for you here. Hollywood horror flicks. Here we go. I know you have a civil tongue in your head. I sewed it there myself.
I was a teenage Frankenstein.
Boom! John, you got it. Very nice. Here's another line from a movie. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Gina Davis, The Fly.
Oh, that's good. Miss Matter of Fact. Well, yeah, now these are lines from great and not so great horror flicks. Well, the reason why we're doing this is because we want to take you behind the scenes in Hollywood to places that we've heard are actually haunted by real ghosts.
There are probably not any more sightings of ghosts in Hollywood than there are in any other part of the world. But the ghosts here are more well known.
For a number of years, author Laurie Jacobson has been intrigued by movie star ghosts. So she finally sat down and wrote a book about the stellar spirits that occasionally make personal appearances in Tinseltown. The book is called Hollywood Haunted. Recently, Jacobson attempted to scare us with some of the strange stories she's chronicled in her book.
When Lon Chaney Sr. was alive, he took a bus every day, which he caught at the corner of Hollywood and Vine, and he went to a different studio every day in search of work. And for years after his death, Hollywood citizens reported seeing the ghost of Lon Chaney Sr. sitting on a bus bench at Hollywood and Vine.
And Lon Chaney isn't the only horror film legend that has made a post-mortem curtain call on Hollywood Boulevard. Just before his funeral, Bela Lugosi insisted on making one final visit to the street he loved so much.
When his coffin was loaded into the hearse, the mortuary had instructions to cross Hollywood Boulevard and drive parallel to it north, instead of driving a funeral procession down the middle of Hollywood Boulevard. But when they got to Hollywood Boulevard, the driver lost control of the hearse. He later said it was as if somebody else was at the wheel, and the car veered across oncoming traffic onto Hollywood Boulevard and slowly made its way down to the corner of Hollywood and Vine, where it stalled momentarily.
On Hollywood Boulevard, about a half-mile west of Vine, stands the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Marilyn Monroe loved to stay here, and apparently still likes to check in. She often stayed in this suite, where she had a full-length antique mirror installed. After her death, they put the mirror in storage. Then, about 10 years ago, they brought it back out.
A lady employee is polishing the mirror, and she sees a blonde woman over her shoulder in the mirror. She thinks someone's come up behind her. She turns around, but there's no one there. Yet when she turns back to the mirror, the image is still there. And she looked real closely at it, and it was Marilyn Monroe. Not seeing the lady, Marilyn looking into the mirror, primping her hair, fixing her makeup.
In another part of the hotel, you can find the room where Montgomery Clift stayed when he was shooting From Here to Eternity. Now it seems his ghost is spending an eternity in this room.
His spirit is not very happy, loves to aggravate the people staying in this room. He constantly takes the phone off the hook, which makes the switchboard ring downstairs, and security has to come up and hang it up. And there's no one staying in the room. The security will open the door and the heat will be on full blast. The windows will be open. Little jokes, pranks. The radio comes on in the middle of the night. People have been shaken awake in their beds there, or felt the weight of a body lying across them on the bed.
So if you're visiting Hollywood and you find yourself tormented by some ghastly apparition, it may not just be your average ghost, but a celebrity spook.
This is Jeff McFarlane of San Francisco. I'd like to recommend to X-File fans an incredibly fascinating new book. It's called The Unofficial X-Files Companion by N.E. Gange. Not only does it give you a thorough analysis of each episode, including historical background, medical truths, and myths that validate or refute many of the strange and surreal plots, but as an added bonus, the author provides trivia busters to test your mental knowledge of each X-Files case. This is a thorough and masterful guide that's thoroughly well-written and well-researched. This is definitely a must-have for X-File fans everywhere.
Next, John Carpenter speaks his mind, and the movie's most successful team, Jekyll and Hyde. Stand by. Next, director John Carpenter talks about what I think is one of his best films. Have you seen it? It's called They Live.
Hi, I'm John Carpenter. I'll take a second to light a cigarette here. I get asked a lot, what are the underlying themes in my movies? What are the messages in my films? I'd like to go into one of my own movies, which I feel was misunderstood at the time, but had a direct theme for today's audience, and that's They Live. They Live was sold as an alien invasion movie starring Roddy Piper as a homeless man who discovers a secret alien enclave taking over the world. Actually, They Live is a documentary about how unrestricted free enterprise is destroying this country. Some of the ideas in They Live are obvious if you really look at them. The whole idea of subliminal images that are bombarding us and telling us what to do. Don't question authority. Consume. Stay asleep. Don't question your surroundings. Don't question what's going on. It seems to me that movie speaks to what's happening right now today, right in our culture. We are kind of zombified out by media, by our shortened attention spans from television, and the Nazis are taking over. They may not be aliens, but I guarantee you, if you think about it long enough, they are not for us. They are for themselves. How come the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? How come that happens? How come we still talk about free enterprise, and really down underneath what we mean is, let's support the rich? The movie I'm talking about, They Live, was made for $3 million. It was a low-budget film. The strange thing is, back in the old days, before all of you were born, low-budget movies used to have subversive messages. That was the whole idea of a B movie. You could put things in it that you couldn't put in mainstream films. Nowadays, everything is mainstream. There are no more outrageous messages. You have to look to genre movies for it. That's why it's so important we keep them alive. We have to keep alive something that isn't just selling the next car on television. I hope you'll support movies, horror, science fiction, and outrageous ideas.
This is Glenn Young from Colorado, and I'd just like to recommend a book called Stealth Squad by a small company called Petra Comics. It's a superhero book based in Colorado Springs, and it's really good. It's really interesting. The characters are complex, and it's a lot different from a lot of the stuff that's going on nowadays in the comic book industry. The stories are interesting, and every time the story ends, it always ends with leading into the next book, which makes you just want to read it that much more. If you're tired of all the stuff that's going on in the superhero books, of all the blood and guts, give this book a try. It's a new company, and I'd highly recommend it.
Hey, Buzzers.
I've decided to take on an assistant. His name is Mr. Edward Hyde, and I intend to give him the run of the house.
Mary Riley is Hollywood's latest retelling of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story. This time, the tale unfolds from the perspective of the doctor's maid. Jekyll and Hyde has been adapted to the screen more times than any other story. Of the dozens of versions, 4 productions rate as must-sees for the serious horror fan. The first movie, based on the Robert Louis Stevenson novel, may have been filmed as early as 1897. But the oldest screen version, which has not yet turned to dust, is this one, released in 1911. One of the most popular of the early Jekyll and Hyde silents, it starred James Cruise. But if one were to pick a classic silent version of Dr. J and Mr. H, it would have to be the 1920 film starring John Barrymore. Barrymore took pride in the fact that his transformation scenes relied as much on his facial contortions as they did on makeup and photographic effects. He portrayed his Mr. Hyde as a human spider with insect-like features and movements. In one scene, Jekyll sleeps as a giant ghostly spider crawls in bed with him and dissolves into his body. The creature was actually Barrymore himself, wearing a spider costume. Film buffs usually cite the 1932 Jekyll and Hyde as the best movie adaptation of the story. The film is the first sound version. For his performance in the lead roles, Frederick March copped a Best Actor Academy Award.
You wanted him to love you, didn't you? I'll give you a lover now. His name is Death.
Director Ruben Mamoulian based this Mr. Hyde on a Neanderthal man. Although nowadays the makeup seems over the top, the transformation scenes still hold up. Some were accomplished by putting red grease paint on Frederick March and a series of red filters over the lights. As the red filters are gradually removed, the makeup gradually appears. In 1941, MGM released its Jekyll and Hyde, starring Spencer Tracy. The film is a carbon copy of the 1932 picture. However, this time the emphasis is not on the grotesque appearance of Hyde, but on the Freudian aspects of the story.
Oh, no. Don't go now, Marcia. After all, this could be very interesting, the three of us in friendly discussion.
Although the picture lacks the raw energy of the Frederick March film, it has a polished style lacking in the earlier production. Plus, Tracy's more subtle-looking Mr. Hyde is more faithful to the character in the book. Like the movies, television has visited the Doctor and his brutish alter ego many times. Most notably in the 1967 production, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Actor Jack Palance and makeup artist Dick Smith combined talents to create one of the nastiest Mr. Hydes of all time. Smith gave this Hyde a devilish appearance. The message of all these productions seems to be that there's a little Hyde lurking in everyone. Maybe that's why this creepy story continues to fascinate us. Coming up, the 30th anniversary of Dark Shadows and a trip inside the dark mind of horror author Dean Koontz. Stay locked on this channel.
You should be dead. Don't you understand? What I've been trying to tell you all along is that I am already dead.
Can you believe it's been 30 years since our favorite gothic horror soap opera debuted on network TV? For 5 years, Dark Shadows gave millions of viewers the chills every weekday afternoon with tales of the supernatural, complete with witches, ghosts, and vampires.
Oh, Jim, you're not going to believe this. Look what we made up. I mean, I think that's perfect.
In honor of the occasion, series star Catherine Lee Scott has teamed up with archivist Jim Pearson to bring faithful fans the Dark Shadows Almanac, a 30th anniversary tribute.
I think it's astonishing that we're reaching our 30th anniversary year. It's amazing. I was on the very first day of the show. In fact, I think I spoke the first live lines on the show. I told Vicki Winters that she was a jerk, a J-E-R-K jerk. That was June 27th, 1966.
Roast beef rare and coffee, right?
Right. I'm starved.
You are also a jerk. Beg your pardon. Jerk. J-E-R-K.
Well, thanks.
Don't mention it.
Several commemorative books have been published by Pomegranate Press in recent years. In fact, Scott formed the company a decade ago to issue her Scrapbook Memories of Dark Shadows. So what makes the latest release unique?
I think the photographs would probably do it. And also, everybody has always asked for things like the birth dates of all the characters. The other thing is that everybody knows that all of us played a lot of different characters, but they want to know how many times I played Rachel Drummond and how many characters I played and when did I play Lady Kitty Hampshire. So all of that sort of information is in there. All of those funny little pieces of trivia that we've never been able to fit in another book.
There's a family tree for the first time.
Oh, there's a family tree. Everybody has been asking about a family tree.
And there's a capsule breakdown of all the storylines for the 5 years in compact paragraphs, so you can kind of get the whole feel of the series in a few pages.
Pearson's memorabilia collection is extensive. And according to Scott, he knows more about Dark Shadows than anyone. Ironically, he didn't watch the show as a kid. He was too busy enjoying the Texas sunshine.
How did you get involved in Dark Shadows if you didn't watch it as a kid? If you didn't run home from school to watch it, what happened? Not a misspent adulthood.
No, I first saw Dark Shadows really when I was a teenager doing sports for the local NBC station in Dallas-Fort Worth. And they were airing reruns, and I'd watch it in between editing Texas Ranger and Dallas Cowboy clips.
Oh, Barnabas, are you sure this is not goodbye?
I'm certain of it.
Catherine Lee Scott remains close to the man who breathed life into the series, Dan Curtis. She believes he instilled the cast and crew with a sense of pride that remains intact to this day.
And when I'm 75 years old, if somebody stops me in a supermarket and says, "I'll never forget you as Maggie Evans," I'll say, "Thank you so much. I had such a good time doing it."
Reruns of Dark Shadows have been airing somewhere in the world since production ceased in 1971. For those looking to catch a chill in 1996, the series airs weekday mornings right here on the Sci-Fi Channel. Since we're doing nothing but creepy features tonight on the Buzz, it's only fitting we pay a visit with Dean Koontz. Actually, a very nice man and a great storyteller. He writes about stuff that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. Author Dean Koontz works on his bestsellers 10 hours a day, many times 7 days a week. He lives in Southern California with his wife, Gerda, who he has known since high school. After 25 years of writing, Koontz is so successful that his books appear in 33 languages, with worldwide sales totaling more than 125 million copies. But what most people don't know about Dean Koontz is he started as a sci-fi writer.
First book I ever sold was to Ace Books and an Ace double. And of course, I'd read the Ace science fiction doubles since I was a kid, and this was a great excitement to me. But I was told by Don Wollheim at the time, who was the editor at Ace, that they couldn't pay me the $1,250 that Ace always paid for one half of the double because my half was too short. They'd have to get a longer book for the other side of the double, and they'd have to pay that writer more money. So they'd have to pay me less, so they offered $1,000. Well, it was very exciting to me to get any payment at anything I'd written, so I leaped on it and said, yes, of course, I'll take the $1,000. Years later, I ran into the writer on the other half, and I had noticed when the book came out that there wasn't a whole lot of difference in the size of our novels. And later, when I ran into that writer at a convention, one of the few I've ever gone to, I said to him jokingly that he made out at my expense. And he blanched and said, no, they had to pay me only $1,000 because my book was too short, and they had to couple it with a longer one. So both of us got paid $1,000, and Ace kept $500, which always amazed me.
Although he started in sci-fi, Koontz has always been driven to write what interests him at the time. In his early years, he wrote under 9 different names in a lot of different genres. His current style is one that is impossible to type. It combines action, psychological terror, and humor. And in recent books, Koontz has developed characters that he calls sympathetic psychopaths.
In Watchers, one thing people like about that book is that the monster in it, the thing that escapes from the lab, has its own dimensions that are interesting beyond just its talent for killing. There's a scene in that where you find the cave it's been living in and it's collected little pathetic belongings, a little Mickey Mouse toy and a little rug and a comic book or something, and it's kind of real poignant and distressing to see that it has this life that it wishes it was something different than what it is. And that pumps up the fearsomeness of the character. Really, this goes back, you could say the same is true of Frankenstein. That's why Frankenstein is scarier, because within that monster there's something there struggling to have a life, to have something beyond something normal in his life, and that makes him, it gives him dimension. It makes him more exciting. For me, it makes him a lot more interesting to write about. I also like to, in Dark Rivers of the Heart, and you say, well, I really like this guy. Why should I like this guy? He's a sociopathic killer. And this, I think, this is more real. It makes the person more true to life. It's why in real life, people who live next door to a guy who buried 30 people in his basement will say, well, he always seems so pleasant. And they always say that, or, well, he's the last person I would have thought. Well, that's because he's not some guy who walks around glaring at people normally, unless he's completely over the deep edge, and doesn't walk around dressed in black with his collar pulled up higher than his head. He's a normal person to outward appearances. That's what makes him more frightening, and that's what makes him more frightening in the books, I think.
I rarely use it myself, sir. It promotes rust.
Deodorant? We're still playing our game here. Now, what movie is that from?
Yeah.
RoboCop.
No. Anybody else? No? Robbie the Robot, Forbidden Planet.
Oh, you're referring to Oxygen.
Yeah.
See, I'm not going to cuss in all of 1996. That's my New Year's resolution. No more cussing. Darn it. But you know, you guys are getting me on the sci-fi trivia. I can still beat you on horror, though. But I'm going to go out and get some sci-fi videos this weekend. You want to watch them over at my place?
Yeah.
Let's go. Hey, everybody. See you next week for The Buzz.
Now stay tuned for Inside Space next on the Sci-Fi Channel.